more than doing fun things, anticipating fun things will increase your enjoyment of the thing and your time during the week. So having that thought ahead of time, like, okay, these are the fun things I'm going to want to do. And it can really be anything. And the other thing to really avoid, I find, is just being like, I'm going to rely on my phone to do something fun, because that just leads us to this idea of low quality free time where we're just not even enjoying it. Like I scroll through, social media for an hour and I'm like, wow, not only did I not do anything fun, I actively made my life worse. So having some ideas ahead of time can really help so you don't hit that low quality free time.
ADHD Rewired, episode 379. This is the podcast for those of us with really good intentions and a slightly wandering attention. I'm Eric Tivers. I'm a licensed clinical social worker by training and a coach by design. I'm your host and I have ADHD. ADHD Rewired is more than just a podcast. We are a community. We are wired for connection and you are not alone. Go to ADHDrewired.com to learn how you can join us in our free secret Facebook group. Get additional resources for every episode, including links to any resources we mention on today's show. You can support us on Patreon, sign up for our email newsletter, you can request podcast postcards to distribute to your clients and support groups, and you can learn all about our intensive online video-based coaching and accountability groups. You can do all of this at our website, ADHDrewired.com. We know that starting is the hardest part, so let's get started. Welcome back to another episode of ADHD Rewired. We are here for our monthly live Q&A. It is May 11th. You're listening to this on the podcast in June, but we have right off the bat Susan, who is going to ask our very first question. Susan, what is your question?
Hi. So I have two young adult children that are diagnosed with ADHD. One at the age of 6 and has been taking stimulant medications on and off. My daughter, on the other hand, tried stimulants and some other medications and didn't like them. This was as a young adult, recently diagnosed. And she wanted to kind of go the natural route and we've been looking into functional psychiatry and functional nutrition to address ADHD symptoms. So I was just wondering if any of you had any experience with that, any advice on how to go about this. It seems like it's a small niche.
Sure. So when I get a little want to shout around consumer awareness when I hear natural approaches, because cyanide is natural and that can kill you. Anything that is quote unquote natural is just marketing, right? Organic has some things, but primarily the all natural stuff, like those all natural, supplements, those pills that are supplements don't grow on trees. They are produced in the same chemistry labs as medications are, but they actually have more strict oversight and are required to have FDA approval. So we might just be splitting hairs of the language. Too. Right.
Yeah, because there's no regulation on supplements.
Right. So when it comes to if what you're calling natural, I like to say non-medication treatments, because I think it muddies the water, and I think to only say all natural, I think it kind of is a shaming, a sort of subversive way to shame people who take medication. Okay. So are we on the same page with you, Susan, on that?
Yes.
Okay.
But I'm including supplements in that. And I agree that can be scary without them being regulated, which is kind of why I've never really explored that route. But then also diet, like food sensitivities and
Sure.
how that impacts your ability to focus and your mood and all of those things.
Sure. So I could speak personally to food sensitivities. This may not have anything to do with ADHD. I discovered that I have a food sensitivity to corn and corn-based products, which if you haven't checked your ingredients lately, it's in everything. And it goes by a ton of different names. And yeah, it affects me. And I think when it comes to food, I think as a general rule, if you're eating crap, it's going to make you feel like crap. If you're eating good food, it's going to make you feel better, right? But everyone kind of responds differently to food. It's one of those like trial and error types of domains. I think it can be cumbersome to do kind of elimination diets to see if you do have any food sensitivities. And the thing is, like with food sensitivities and allergies are not the same thing. Like food sensitivities often don't show up on tests, which is really annoying, right? But as far as like food, yeah, eat good food. Exercise is probably the, I think, best non-medication tool for ADHD. Will Curb just had an episode about water, the importance of drinking water. And so it's like a lot of the stuff is good sort of like self-care, health behaviors. But yeah, as far as supplements, I always just say, be careful, be really careful. Anyone want to add to that? Moira?
So you use the term functional, and what you're talking about is stuff that I've spent a lot of time working and learning about, because I also have an autoimmune disease. I have an eating disorder that grew out of untreated ADHD. And one of the things about functional is the idea about a functional or integrative health practitioner is that they're considering your entire system, your entire body, how things interplay together. And so that's very different than holistic or natural. And there are training, like I'm starting with a medical doctor who is a functional practitioner, because also we know in the medical system that their knowledge in a lot of these areas can be very limited. They're just not taught those things. One of the things I'm really learning about, because I am receiving treatment for disordered eating, and a lot of people with ADHD have disordered eating, is how much of all of these things are business. There's a massive marketing culture around how we eat, what we do. And so adding on to what Eric said, sleep is super important. Mindfulness has been incredibly important. Yoga is a good way to do that. I lived 45 years with untreated ADHD, and all of those things. I mean, when you say functional psychiatry, to me, that sounds like maybe psychology, right? Someone who's not prescribing medication. And that's a great support. And so is coaching for ADHD. So there are lots of non-medicated things that you can do. So I hope that's helpful.
And Susan, can I ask you, and forgive me if you already said this, you said one of your kids they don't want to take medication, or they weren't responding well to it?
She didn't like it. The stimulant medications were making her extremely nauseous. She didn't like how she felt.
Okay. And did they try more than one medication?
She did.
Okay. Different classes of the stimulants?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, it sounds like you did the stuff you got, that's recommended that you do first. Keep in mind too, that it may be worth revisiting in 5 to 10 years. Like we have seen that people who don't respond well to medication, revisit it later in life and may actually have a positive response to it. And there also are the non-medication, or the non-stimulant, medications as well. Including even off-label stuff like Wellbutrin is often prescribed for people with ADHD, which is a depression that's often prescribed for anxiety and depression. All right, let's go to our next question. And I just want to say something that I just saw come up in the chat. Chris said that natural flavoring just means that the flavor exists in nature. I think that's great. Okay. Thank you, Susan, for your question. Winston, you are up. What is your question?
Hey, Eric. Nice to finally make one of these. So my question is around texting. And I struggle with texting. I more so struggle with responding to text, and in a timely way. So, things will come in and I'll see them. But I just find I just get easily overwhelmed, and then kind of one thing piles up to the other. I have, other texts that are out there, and then they just end up kind of sitting in this purgatory for a minute. And it's even worse with group text. So it's like, most of my birthday greetings are happy belated because by the time I know about it, it's like too late.
Well, people with ADHD, we extend people's birthday wishes one belated birthday wish at a time. You're
That's
welcome,
right.
everybody.
Yep.
All right. So right now we have 59 people who are here in the Q&A. Can we get, I'm going to ask everyone to raise their Zoom hand if you struggle with responding to text messages on a timely manner. All right, let's see how many hands are going up here.
My people.
All right, like all of them, I think. We have 24, 25, plus the panelists. So half the attendees and the panelists. The other half, I can't confirm whether or not they're paying attention to the question. But yes, this is something that we struggle with. Okay, so I want to check in with everyone, all of our panelists here. What do you do that helps?
Well, I first want to clarify if part of the issue is that you're worried about the tone you're going to say what you're responding with. And so you put off responding so that you can have the perfect response so that they won't misinterpret what you're trying to say.
I could definitely see that playing into it. In some cases, yeah, I find like I trip over my words a lot and I end up like rewriting things and just like, it's almost like the question that's there is subconsciously does this make sense? Does this make sense? Like, am I being clear? Like,
do you ever use voice text?
Yeah, it's a savior. That helps.
And what about voice memos?
Just like record and playback or no, not so much, but I do. I mean, voice definitely. That's something that's been part of my embracing ADHD is that I am auditory, oriented. Lexi is all over the house, so I cannot say the name out loud, but
okay,
big part of the family.
So a few things. One, thank you for reminding me that Will Curb texted me literally a month ago, and I have not replied to him yet. So, Will, I'll get back to you shortly. About that question that I was asking at the last Q&A. So like that's a thing, right? And it wasn't, I prioritize my texts in two ways. One, is this topic important? Two, is this person important? And the topic and the person were important a month ago. And I still didn't get back to Will because like other things happen in my life that are not texting that like interrupt it. And then I just forget that even happened. So that part is true. And I want to honor that. Like it's, and also texting is an asymmetrical communication form, just like email, right? So people don't often even get upset about the fact that you haven't replied for a while. And if you're texting someone who has ADHD, they might forget too, because Will did look at his phone like, oh, did we have a text a month ago that I'm not remembering? So there's that piece. And the other part I want to point out is if you're worried about tone, one thing you can do is as long as you're confident that you're not coming across like a huge jerk, like just a rage monster, as long as that's not the issue, just spell some stuff wrong. Because then it looks like you're not super tuned into the text and you don't have to worry about tone as much because they're not going to they're going to assume it was like mistyped or something because you spelled something wrong.
Is that the equivalent of writing in cursive because you don't actually know how to spell the word?
Sure. Yeah, I'm on board with that. Why not?
Winston, do you have an iPhone or Android?
iPhone.
Okay. So something that has actually been really helpful for me is on iPhone, you can pin text messages that you haven't responded to. So if you do like a long hold on a particular message, when you're in your messages list, one of the first option there is pin. Right. So that tells me that there's a message I need to respond to. So I find that to be really, really helpful. Now I'm just imagining like almost everyone who's listening to this right now who has an iPhone is going, wait, what? You can do that? Whoa.
Yeah. The mind blown emoji is coming up right now.
And emojis are a great way to respond too. Like Bitmojis are fantastic. Bitmojis say things that words cannot say.
Yeah. It gives the whole tone thing because, we can't have sarcasm in our text, but if you have like, yeah, that's a great idea. And then have like an emoji, like a frowny face, then people go, oh, he means sarcasm.
Right.
Yeah, I was talking about this in the parent coaching groups yesterday. Because the role of symbols, because that's what that is, emojis are symbols. The role of those emojis is to display and share the emotional content that texting and emails can't convey. It can only convey the cognitive academic content. So using emojis and bitmojis and all that stuff is great to express the emotional side of things too. And that can help with how am I coming across? It can be a little more clear because you threw in some emoji stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Some of us are able to have entire conversations with using GIFs. And if you're looking for something and you just type office after it, you'll get like an office version of it. And so that can really help sort of convey stuff without having to type up words too. I want to write a book that way.
Yeah, Moira.
And MJ, did you hear how Moira said GIFs? Harji?
GIFs? What?
No, you're right. GIFs.
Okay, GIFs. Okay. I was like, what? I just Googled the difference between a GIF and a meme because I was like, I don't know. I want to do some correct one. Memes are static.
Does anybody use like audio? Like I have one friend and all his messages, at least the ones he initiates or responds, generally he uses audio. Does anybody use that as a primary?
Sometimes.
Yes.
Yeah.
I do. If you want me to listen to it, I'm sorry, that's really hard for me.
Well, that's my
so you have to know your audience, right?
Right. It's eeasier to get out, but will it actually be listened to?
So if you can create a TLDL, too long didn't listen, and you just give like the subject of what the voice memo that you're sending is, that could help.
Okay. Look, that's a combo.
Have it always be your birthday present or something like that. And then people are like, oh, I'm going to listen.
I have one last chime in before we move on to the next one. If somebody asks me a question, I'll just be like, can I get back to you on like whatever day and time? And if you don't hear from me by this day and time, text me and remind me. And if they don't, then it wasn't important enough to get back to anyway.
Mic drop.
There you go.
Okay. You can leave now, MJ. Yeah, just dust yourself off and leave.
I'll see myself out.
All right. Well, I hope that was helpful. I know this is an area that a lot of us do struggle with. So it just occurred to me as we are, about 20 minutes in, I never introduced anyone who is here as a panelist. So let's just do that really quickly. Moira Maybin from the ADHD Friendly Lifestyle. We have MJ Siemens from ADHD Diversified, Will Curb from Hacking Your ADHD, and Brendan Mahan from ADHD Essentials. Every time I introduce you guys, I'm like, there's a split second where I'm like, is my brain going to lock your podcast name into my brain for a moment? But it didn't do it again. But I felt like it was trying to.
I like the way you flex and introduce us in a different order every time. Instead of just having like an automatic, this is the order. Like for me, it goes Eric, Will, MJ, Moira. Because that's the chronological order of when they got released, when the podcast got released. Yep. So I always do it in that order. But I don't know if you do it based on where we are on the screen or what's happening. But every time it's a different order.
There is a absolute no rhyme or reason or logical approach to it's sort of like I think it was on I go left to right on my screen. That's actually what I do.
Yeah.
All right. Do we have another queued up?
Yes, we have Jane, and it's not live.
And that's Barb at McDonough, everyone. Barb at McDonough is she's kind of the brains that keep the gears going here at ADHD reWired. Hi, Barb.
Hi.
All right. So what's Jane's question?
Jane's question is there any link between ADHD and difficulty controlling body temperature?
I don't know. That's a great question, though. MJ?
I was to say we could also do how many people.
Yeah, so we'll do a raise of hands. Here, let's do that first. Raise of hands if you have issues with controlling your body temperature. And I'm thinking about it. I know after I work out, it takes me a long time to cool down. I don't know if that's like a thing. So we got 18 people who said 19, 20. Okay, so about a third of people said yes, they have issues around regulating body temperature. MJ?
Well, that makes me feel not so terribly weird. So when I started medication
because before I started medication, I usually ran very, very warm. Like I am warm all the time and it drives me crazy. When I started my first dose of medication, which was 10 milligrams of Vyvanse, I didn't really notice a big difference. And then when I started 20, I went from being boiling hot all the time to freezing. Like I was cold all the time. I was like, this is weird and I don't like being cold. This is the worst. And then I bumped up to 30 milligrams of Vyvanse. And now my body temperature is like kind of more regulated. Like there's still a little bit of like, my body can't decide whether it wants to be too hot or too cold, but it's not as like, that's better than, yeah, there's not really, I've never had like a Goldilocks zone when it comes to managing body temperature, but I just noticed that when I was reporting back to my psychiatrist about how's the meds going, and the first thing that I noticed other than the increase in executive functions was my body temperature. So it's a really, really good question. Thanks for asking that, Jane.
Moira?
So yeah, the cold hands and feet, and MJ, you might be able to add in, I don't know if it's I can't remember if it's a Vyvanse thing.
It's a stimulant
thing. Or if it's a stimulant thing. Okay, so that's definitely part of it. But I've also struggled with that because I have thyroid disease. And so checking your body temperature is a really important one, because that can make you colder as well. And then there's hormones because, perimenopause, I'm hot all the time. I have a fan that I have on my desk in the winter. So I have a heated steering wheel and deep socks for my hands and my feet, and I'm totally hot. So
it's really interesting too, because when the question was asked, I was like, no, I don't have any issues with regulating body temperature. And as we're talking this through, I'm like, oh no, wait a minute. I have tons of issues with regulating body temperature. Like we have 2 seasons in the Chicago area. There's warm socks season and summer. I wear wool, crazy thick, they're called hot feet, because my feet are constantly frozen. And sometimes my hands are really, really cold. And I do think that is primarily from the medications.
And how many of us dress in layers that's just you kind of have to, because you never know. That used to be just a West Coast thing, because we have the cold air. But I think I never know what temperature I'm going to be.
I was going to add on for, this is a huge issue with sleep for a lot of people too. I used to use something called a chili pad on my bed that would keep it a little bit colder so that I could sleep. But I've upgraded to a thing from a place called 8 Sleep, and it can control my sleep, like the temperature of my bed, all night long. Instead of just having the chili pad, you just set a temperature and it goes that.
Wait, what is the thing you have now?
It's 8 Sleep. They make mattresses, and I got a just a cover for the bed.
Or 8, 7, 8, 9. Oh, poor 9.
The digit 8. But my wife is always amazed. She crawls into bed. She's like, it's warm when I get into bed. This is the best. Whereas I'm I would never be able to fall asleep that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I hate being hot. I'm an irritable a-hole when I get hot.
I got a couple thoughts. One is, let me start with, this is the kind of question that I'm I hope you're doing research. Because this is the kind of question that I'm if an ADHD researcher wants to ask this question, I'm cool, that's a really cool research question. Mm-hmm. But if you're just some person off the street who's do I have trouble regulating my body temperature because I have ADHD? I'm kind of pump the brakes, because not everything is ADHD, right? That it doesn't have to be that all the things that happen with you are somehow connected to ADHD or autism or whatever is going on, right? It doesn't have to be. You can just be cold or warm or oddly temperatured. So I want to start there. And in playing with that, I want to then flirt with the stuff that we've already talked about, right? Maybe it's medication. It could be that so many people in this group Q&A that raise their hands, I wonder if they're all on medication, and that is playing a role in their difficulty regulating their body temperature. And I was on Google Scholar. I found one article connecting ADHD and body temperature regulation, but it was a piece of something, and I didn't have time to read it. But the other thing that was coming up was sleep disorders. So I wonder if there's a correlation between sleep disorders and body temperature regulation, which makes way more sense to me. But there's also correlation between ADHD and sleep disorders. So now we have a cascade effect tying those things together. All of that said, though, that's me kind of being researcher brain in a way. And I want to circle back to just because you have something, I don't care what it is. The other things that go on for you don't have to be connected to the thing that you are most associating yourself with, in this case, ADHD. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I think that's such a good point. And going back to the one I made about thyroid, right? I discovered I had thyroid disease by checking my body temperature and finding out it was lower than average and tracking that for multiple days. And then, learning stuff myself, but also pursuing it with a doctor.
All right. I think this is a really good time to take a quick break. We have a bunch more questions that we're going to get to when we come back. So here's a quick word and we will be right back. Support for ADHD reWired comes from the ADHD reWired coaching community, which includes both our alumni community and our coaching and accountability groups. We only have 2 weeks left in our 24th season, which means season 25 is just around the corner. We're going to have one final registration event for our summer season this Thursday at 1:30 p.m. Central. That's Thursday, June 10th. So if you missed last week's registration event, but you're still wanting to join us this summer, we have just a few spots left in sections 1, 2, and 4. Section 3 is now full with several people on the wait list. Check out coachingrewired.com for the most up-to-date section availability, and then take that next step on your ADHD journey and join us by going now to coachingrewired.com and click on the red button if you are somewhere between the Pacific and Eastern time zones, or click on the blue button if you're outside of that area to get your name added to our summer interest list. You will automatically get an invitation to our next event. Yes, we would love to have you join us for our 25th season of coaching and accountability groups. I was just listening to some of the archives from our 15th season of coaching and accountability groups, where we had Will Kerb, who is the host of Hacking Your ADHD. During this season, Will had already been through the program and was now working with us as an admin. We spell admin with 2 Ds. He was working as a peer mentor in this 15th season of coaching groups. Listen to what Will said. This was before he started his podcast.
If you're thinking about joining this group, you've got to just realize that there's so many more people out there that are like you. Coming into the group, you just immediately feel this sense of community with people that you're just like, they're so different from me, but their brains are just like mine. And it's wonderful because every time I screw up with something, I'm like, but I can talk to these people about it because they understand. They've done the same thing. We went through that a couple times earlier with like, who paid the ADHD tax? Everyone raised their hand with and put in chat with all these things that's like, yeah, I did these stupid things, and it's okay for us to say that here. And that makes this group just so special because you don't have that community almost anywhere else. And it's what makes me so appreciative to be here and to keep coming back to be an admin and keep working with this group. So I think that's why, just without anything else, that's one of the most important things you get out of being in this group.
Every single season, our coaching members work together and learn how to ask better questions, plan their days, weeks, month, and discover for themselves that they are not alone on their journeys. Our coaching and accountability groups aren't just about the skills. It's about making connection. It's about finding community and how we can all work together to do hard things. Come find out why Chad at the International Conference on ADHD gave the ADHD reWired coaching and accountability groups the recognition for an innovative program of the year. So whether you are new to this podcast or you've been listening for a while and you've been thinking about joining our award-winning intensive online coaching and accountability groups, then head on over to coachingrewired.com and click that red button and watch your inbox for your email to register. And don't wait, because you have things that you will need to submit to us to actually get that invitation. We would love for you to join us for our 25th season of coaching and accountability groups. Take that first step by going to coachingrewired.com. That's coachingrewired.com. our adult study hall community is vibing and thriving. We're now 3 weeks in after our beta testing launch date and have got to say people are rocking it in adult study hall 24/7, or it's called ASH 24/7. And it's been really cool so far to see our ADHD brains all come together to get stuff done. Folks are also giving some amazing feedback on new topics and ASH Plus sessions we're planning to add in the future, so that when we reopen our doors on June 22nd, it will be even better than it is now. Not sure what we're talking about here? Head on over to adultstudyhall.com. Our new Adult Study Hall membership community includes Adult Study Hall Plus, or ASH Plus, facilitated by our very own ADHD reWired coaching and accountability alumni members, and some other folks. These themed and guided sessions are for members who want some added structure when tackling their to-dos. Then we have a room that is open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, which is why we call it ASH 24/7. You can jump in at any time from anywhere if you need extra accountability to start crossing things off your to-do list. There have already been some big wins and victories, and I can't wait to see what more we can accomplish together. Access and membership to the Adult Study Hall community is only $19.99 a month. You'll have access to ASH 24/7, and you'll get to choose from all the different types of themed ASH Plus sessions, like the one that I'm actually hosting right now while recording this. We're doing a 2-hour Pomodoro dance party, where after each 25-minute work cycle, I play some fun music and we dance. Dancing is required. Dance skills are not. Are you looking for your next go-to space where it's ADHD friendly and everyone just gets it? Head on over to adultstudyhall.com and fill out the form to get your name added and join this amazing community when we reopen the virtual doors for our grand reopening on Tuesday, June 22nd. The website, adultstudyhall.com. One more time, that's adultstudyhall.com. I'll see you there. All right, we are back. We have Rich, who has a question for us. Rich, what is your question?
Hey, everybody. Thanks for the wonderful show. And just wanted to ask you all. I was at a county council meeting last night, and I asked them, what are school systems doing for funding for social emotional learning going back into the fall? Having had kids out of school now for more than a year in many instances, what is the landscape going to look like for school counselors, school psychologists, and resources for students and for the staff now that everybody's going to be back in buildings for the first time?
Brendan?
Might want to check out my most recent episode of my podcast, because we come really close to this topic if we don't actually nail what you're looking for. I interviewed a woman who is a English teacher in Boston.
What episode number is it, Brendan? Because this will be out in a month.
Episode 180.
Something.
I don't know. It's probably like 4 or 5 episodes back from wherever you started. Her name is Mary DeBinga. In terms of stuff that I can't answer about funding, because that varies wildly based on district, based on states, based on lots of stuff. I mean, pieces of what Biden is doing in the United States is to address those needs, right? That's why towns are getting the money that they're getting and local aid and that kind of stuff. It's a lot of it is intended to tackle some of the stuff you're talking about, Rich. I can tell you, schools know that they need to be worried about this, or at least the ones I'm talking to. The teachers know, the guidance counselors know, the administration knows. That doesn't, but then circling back to that funding part, that doesn't mean that they're necessarily going to have the resources to tackle what might need to be tackled. And there are lots of teachers, there are lots of guidance counselors who are burned out. There's a whole lot of compassion fatigue happening, especially for guidance counselors right now, because the kids have a lot of needs, and like administration and staff is doing the best that they can. It's not that this is being ignored, but it is challenging. I am in contact with a few school districts. I'm already booking workshops for next year to go in and teach people about executive function and social emotional learning and all that kind of stuff. I'm already setting those workshops up, but it's going to vary wildly. Like Montana is not going to look like Massachusetts, which is not going to look like Texas, which is not going to look like California, which is not going to look like Illinois. Like it's just going to be a lot different depending on where you are. Am I even coming close to answering this in a useful way?
Yes, I think so. So then do we direct our questions to our new education secretary, Cardona, and place it on the federal government to give guidance and kind of guardrails for them going forward as to what this could potentially look like? They've got all this money that they're, the ARP money that's coming down the pike, and Massachusetts guy. And what's going to end up happening is the school districts aren't really going to be focused really well on the student needs. I think what I've seen here locally is they're more worried about getting the teachers caught up on their pay scale, rather than putting additional resources in place that are going to be useful to the kids in the fall.
Because they're going to lose staff.
Yes.
They've got to catch their teachers up on the pay scale because teachers are going to walk because they're burnt. And if they can go somewhere else and get paid the same or better, they're going to. That not all of them, but enough of them. And I want to throw this to Moira too, because she's also a teacher person. And it shouldn't just be me doing this.
Oh, I mean, it's okay because we're in a different context because we don't have any federal oversight on education. They're all done provincially and every province is different. And in British Columbia, our kids have been in school since June 1st last year. But there isn't the things that we need, all that burnout, all that underpay. I actually learned that teachers in BC make less than a lot of teachers in the United States. So you're right. There's already a shortage of men in education, and people who can leave will leave. And so we do need to do better at taking care of people. And I really don't know how much more to add to that because seems like a really specific context of, and I don't know if but in the States, but in Canada, unless parents are the ones demanding it, educators have no voice anymore. What we say doesn't matter.
Yeah. And I think when it comes to advocacy, it's in all of the above, right? It's like, I think it's great if you're, contacting federal officials. I think it's great when you're contacting your state officials. And I think you're going to see like how that all connects by getting involved at a local level. And just to thank all the teachers this year who have just been like, oh my gosh, watching what my son's teachers have had to do. Like when I'm leading group, I am leading group and I have two helpers in the group to help me so I don't have to deal with a distraction because someone needs additional help, right? Not only do they not have that, the teachers that are doing hybrid are not only teaching to Zoom, they are also teaching in their classroom, and they're also having to differentiate both on Zoom and in the classroom all at the same time. And so when I hear people complaining about teachers making too much money and giving them a hard time about wanting more money, I have very little sympathy for that argument. Okay, I'm going to step off my soapbox now. Rich, I hope that was helpful.
It was. Thank you. Thank you all so much. I appreciate it. And let me also just put a word out there for parents. If you have these questions, contact your Board of Education or your local school district and start asking the questions now.
Beautiful.
Because this is the time when they really need to be putting in the work to make sure fall goes smoothly for everyone. Thank you, guys.
Good thought. Thank you, Rich. All right. Who do we have next? Or what question do we have next?
Next question comes from Les. Any advice on how to not feel anxious, have decision paralysis when you get free time and are worried about how to make the most efficient use of your time?
Structuring free time. It's so interesting because this is something that I've wrestled with too. I used to be a professional chillaxer. I could chill so easily. I loved it. Free time, nothing to do. Great. I'll find stuff to do. And then adult life showed up and I seem to have kind of lost that ability and I'm trying to rediscover it. So I do think that sort of planning the things that you want to do on your free time is actually really, really helpful and important. And I know that a lot of people, I think, believe that scheduling their free time activities feels sort of like restrictive. It's actually freedom, right? Because keep in mind, you can move any of that stuff around that's in your calendar at any time that you want to, right? But you're giving yourself a bit of a structure for the things that you want to do. Will?
Yeah. And to go along with planning, more than doing fun things, anticipating fun things will increase your enjoyment of the thing and your time during the week. So having that thought ahead of time, like, okay, these are the fun things I'm going to want to do. And it can really be anything. And the other thing to really avoid, I find, is just being like, I'm going to rely on my phone to do something fun, because that just leads us to this idea of low quality free time where we're just not even enjoying it. Like I scroll through, social media for an hour and I'm like, wow, not only did I not do anything fun, I actively made my life worse. So having some ideas ahead of time can really help so you don't hit that low quality free time.
Brendan.
Also, sort of echoing the high quality free time, and also Eric's plan for structure is you can not exactly structure free time, but give yourself a fallback strategy. Like every Tuesday, I go for a walk if I have free time. And every Wednesday, I play video games. And every Thursday, I don't know, knit, like whatever your thing is, right? You can just plug them in on random days. And then if you suddenly find you've got an hour and a half of nothing to do on a Thursday, be like, oh, time to bust out the yarn. Because that's what I do on Thursdays if I don't know what else to do in my free time.
Moira?
I have been a great person for getting up and being like, I want to spend the day outside. And then I follow my nose, right? And one of the things that I learned from you, Eric, was the notion of that, proximity prioritization, and that I need reminders. So I'll have Post-it notes that tell me to go outside. Also having that schedule like people have talked about. But I love being outside. So I have on my schedule for every day 1 yard thing. It's not defined what it is, but it's just like, hey, you could get your ass outside and do one thing in the yard and that'll make you happy. So sometimes it's just having little ways to poke and do that reminder, because otherwise I will prioritize other things over having fun, which is no fun.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially if the work that you do, you enjoy. And this is something that I kind of realized over the last couple of years, is that because I do love the work that I do, and so it's like, I'm happy doing my stuff. So why am I going to want to go do other stuff? Because it's so important to do other stuff. Your brain needs breaks away from the thing that you love. If that is, if you are fortunate enough to have a, work that you love doing. But yeah, I think that scheduling your free time is so important. Give yourself some options and some accountability. If that means you make plans with a friend, you buy tickets to something, the world will open back up where you will be able to go to things that are like concerts and movies and stuff like that again. Because I think that when we pay for it up front, like, we're gonna go.
Just if you buy tickets for something, make sure that you know when it's happening, so you don't accidentally go to an event a year in advance. Because not that I've done that.
Yes, you have.
Totally did that.
That was amazing.
And then you know what the worst part about going to that thing a year in advance was? Then it got canceled due to COVID and we didn't get to go at all.
Oh my gosh. That was a great story. I love that. All right. Barb, what about you? How do you have fun?
Let's see. Well, I started kickboxing. That's fun. And it's my own thing. Because I tend to exercise with my family, which I love, kayaking and hiking. But it felt good to pick something I really like. So,
and in the summertime, you and your family go up. You have an RV.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So like every weekend, you know what you're doing.
Every weekend, and it's nice to get away from the house because you will find something to do, and to really take a break. So that's something we do every weekend.
I mean, sort of playing with this idea of how can I create more routine novelty in my life? And so something like, having a place that you go to every weekend would be a great example of routine novelty. Like, you don't have to plan it. You don't have to think that much ahead of time. It's like the place you go, and it's different from your week.
That's part of that travel episode we're going to do. That's part of it.
Looking forward to that.
Balancing the novelty with the familiar.
I have a client who, speaking of sort of routine novelty, he goes into the woods and makes weird art. Like, he just makes weird stuff and then brings it into woodland paths and stuff. Or he makes it while he's there out of sticks and rocks and stuff, so that other people will find weird stuff while they're hiking.
That's awesome.
So you could do that too if you wanted to.
I love that. And if all else fails, you might want to consider picking up the game of pickleball. What's our next question?
Next question comes from Hannity. How important, effective is it to establish some healthy habits like cutting down on sugar, developing a good sleep routine in terms of time and hours, sports and physical activity?
Those are good things. Real.
This relates to another question that was up there sometime, and asking what medication doesn't help with. And pills don't teach skills, but healthy habits create routines for you, give you energy to do all the things you want to do. And I mean, I called them healthy habits. They're habits that are going to make you feel better and have a better life. So I can't speak to cutting down on sugar because I don't actually have any data on what that will do, because I feel like it should help, but I don't have real data that says that. Whereas with exercise, that absolutely has data that it will help with your focus, and sleep is probably the number one thing for ADHD to keep management much easier.
Yeah, that stuff's critical, right? It's so important to do that stuff. And before we accidentally guilt trip everybody, this feels like a good time for me to go to my catchphrase. Ladies and gentlemen, we are still living through a global pandemic, and we still suck at stuff more than we used to. And that is still okay. So if sugar is more delicious than it used to be, and you're eating more sugar than you used to, if you've gained the COVID 30, like I have probably, that's okay. You will get there's the light at the end of the tunnel, right? We're getting through this. We can start to pick up the pieces wherever those pieces happen to be now, or a month from now, or 2 months from now. But don't feel terrible if you're not executing on these habits that are good, healthy habits. Just do a little bit better tomorrow and a little bit better the day after. And then, screw up and do worse. And that's okay. Forgive yourself and then do a little better the day after that.
That's great. Moira?
Yeah. I mean, echoing Brendan, and Will, eat, move, sleep, go outside, and, just try to do a little bit better if you're not happy with how you did, but don't beat yourself up.
Yeah. Beating yourself up is actually never helpful. It's if you can tell me a time that you've actually found that beating yourself up to be helpful, let's have a conversation about it. Because I'd be really interested, because I've never, ever seen that to be helpful or healthy. All right. Speaking of healthy things like breaks, we're going to take a quick break, and we will be right back. Support for ADHD Rewired comes from our patrons who support us over on Patreon. If you are new to the show, welcome. If you're a longtime listener, welcome back. One way listeners have shown their support for this podcast is by becoming a patron. This month, we have a Lauren B., who has joined us at the $3 a month level, and a Flo S., who is joining us at the $25 a month level. Thank you for all of your support. Patrons like Flo, who contribute at the $25 a month level, can join me for a group coaching call every fourth Tuesday of the month at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern. Our next group coaching call is on Tuesday, June 22nd. Would you like to get ad-free episodes of this podcast right in your podcast player? Patrons at the $5 a month level can. Once you become a patron at $5 a month or more, click Account, then Overview, and click Get Audio RSS link. This is on the Patreon app. I just did this as a patron for Hacking Your ADHD, and it just took a minute. No matter the pledge, I am thankful for any contribution you're able to give. And if right now you can't give a pledge, that is all right too. I'm just glad that you're listening. I appreciate you as well. Also, please check to see if your account is up to date. If your credit card recently changed, don't forget to come back to Patreon and update your account information. Find out more about our Patreon community and all the perks at each level by going to ADHDrewired.com and click on the Patreon tab at the top of the page. Really and truly, I am so grateful for all of you. Thank you so much. Whether you are new to this podcast or you're a longtime listener, I want to make sure that you and everyone else knows about the other incredible ADHD podcasts that we have here on the ADHD reWired Podcast Network. If you got kids, check out ADHD Essentials. Want some shorter episodes with actionable tips and a really satisfying dad joke? Go check out Hacking Your ADHD. ADHD Diversified offers unique perspectives of living with ADHD. The host, MJ Siemens, is an Asian Canadian, and she shares so much that I think we can all relate to. And if you're a late diagnosed woman, check out the ADHD Friendly Lifestyle. You can find all of our podcasts on the podcast network page at ADHDrewired.com. And come meet everyone from the ADHD Rewired Podcast Network every second Tuesday of the month at 12:30 p.m. Central for an hour of live Q&A on Zoom. And if you're catching this early enough on the day it came out, that would happen to be today. Register at ADHDrewired.com/events. Plus, we will be joined by Coach Roxy Martin at our next live Q&A. And don't forget to hit subscribe and leave those ratings and reviews for this and all of our other podcasts, because doing that may help other people find our shows, and it also fills our little podcaster buckets. Thanks for listening, subscribing, sharing, and reviewing all of our podcasts with others in the ADHD community. Tell your friends, virtual support groups, your therapists, and your mom about the ADHD reWired Podcast Network. All right, we are back. What is our next question?
Next question is from Mark. You've said the key to dealing with overwhelm is to close as many loops as possible. How to accomplish this while loosely following a GTD methodology?
Well, get it out of your head would be to me, is the most important part of GTD, is to get it out of your head. And also to know that the part in GTD where they say, if you can do it in 2 minutes or less, just do it now. That doesn't apply for us, because I don't think we can do anything in 2 minutes or less. At least I can't. So, I mean, the closing the loops, if you have something open, you kind of bring it back up to the top of that list. And also, if you have an open loop, here's another thing too that I think we think about open loops. Not all open loops actually need to be like completed, but you do have to dismiss open loops, right? So if you worked on something and you're like, oh, I didn't finish this, but this isn't like done yet. Like if it's no longer relevant, I love that. MJ is showing us a sticky note that says, get shit done one step at a time. And then an acronym for done, dismiss one non-essential. That's awesome. Yeah. So getting rid of stuff is also a really it's a viable way to close loops. And one of the advantages of having ADHD when you have CRS, which is, can't remember shit. When you take that item off your to-do list that you're like, oh, I don't know if I should take it off. I don't know if I should take it off. You're feeling the guilt about it. Like 30 seconds after you take it off, you're going to just forget it ever existed. So it'll be fine.
Also, how long has that loop been open? Because if it's been open for like a month and a half, 2 months, how much does that loop really matter? That's a way to make the decision too sometimes.
Yeah. And I think for things like that, if you get rid of it off your list, and it really is important, I think it will organically come back up. All right. I think we covered that one. Next question.
All right. It's from Diane. When you know what you must do next and have a good list of priorities, but are on total overload and feel frantic, how do you get yourself together to take action?
How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. And when that still feels overwhelming, you invite your friends. Ask for help. Sometimes when I am just completely overwhelmed and I know the things that I have to do, I will share those things that I have to do with somebody else. And it sometimes can make it easier to identify first action steps when you are in the presence of someone else. What do you guys do?
Wait, what was the question?
If we're playing a drinking game, I think, how many times we say that? Moira, what was the question?
The question was, what do we do when we're basically completely overwhelmed and it seems like there's so much stuff to do? For me, I have to do a brain dump, get it all out. And then I always want to do way more than is physically possible in a time period. So I've started asking myself, what do I have to do? What can I put off? What can wait? And what are the things that are important to who I am? And do like all the things that you're saying too, but really just sort of trying to get it out of my head really helps.
Yeah. MJ.
So something that we're doing in the current season of coaching groups is all the groups are encouraged to post top 3 things that they're doing that day. And I think narrowing the focus has really helped me just sort of zone into, okay, this is what I need to do today. And I'll usually have a theme for each one of those 3 things. So like self-care and one important but not urgent thing and something that would feel really, really good to get off my list. And everything else is secondary. If I can't achieve those 3 things that I'm trying to focus on, and I have like 20 things, then I do get overwhelmed. And I think it's important, kind of echoing what Moira said, to have that scope of what feels good for us, what do we value, what is going to be beneficial for us to get done. So yeah, if there's too much on the list, just like I showed the sticky note earlier, like dismiss one non-essential.
I think we often have so many things on our list, but we can only do one thing at a time. And I think that when we're clear on our priorities, I like the sort of that idea is once you have your top 3 priorities for the day, you have to earn the right to do anything else that's not those 3 things. So to me, that's helpful. Brendan?
Also, when I start getting overwhelmed, it's because I'm promising stuff to other people. Because I'm pretty good at following through on the stuff that I want to do and that I need to do and those sorts of things. So when I start to get totally flat out and overwhelmed and oh my God, one of the things I do is I look at what I've promised intentionally or unintentionally to other people. And like, as my friend Renee Brooks likes to say, this is not a blood oath. Like, just because I agreed to do this thing with you doesn't mean I have to. And depending on my relationship with you, I might want to disappoint you. So you stop wanting me to do things for you. Or you might be a friend that won't care, right? Like, so it's okay to say, you know what? I can't do this thing in the time that you want me to do it. I can't do this thing at all. You can say no to people. And then you can, once you've had to say no, like in retrospect a couple of times, then you can start learning how to say no in advance. Because that's even better, right? Like you can avoid overwhelm by saying, I don't know, let me get back to you when people ask stuff of you.
And I think even too, having a quick go-to like overwhelm plan, like drink some water, get a little bit like a short little bit of movement exercise. Just get your body moving. That's sometimes getting your body moving will sort of free up some of the clogged gears in the brain.
Yeah. Also crying and then flicking your tears at people. That's a great call. That's really helpful.
I have nothing to add to that. Can we go to our next question?
My daughter, who's ADHD inattentive, is interested in med school, specifically to become a psychiatrist, but she's very concerned it would be too stressful and too many years. Any advice to help her make a decision about a future career?
Good luck.
What is it about being a psychiatrist that she wants? And if med school is intimidating, can she do all the same stuff as a psychologist?
I remember being at a CHAD conference, and one of the keynote speakers was talking about, professionals who have gone on to get professional degrees, master's degrees, who have ADHD is like 1% of the ADHD population. And I just remember that, like, that was the thing that made me cry that year. Cause it was like, it was sort of that validating piece that, like, oh my God, yeah. Like, I think grad school was one of the hardest things I ever did. And it's not for the faint of heart. Like, it's doable, like, but it just depends on the person. But just like, know that, like, you have to really, really, really want it and have accommodations and structures that are going to work for you. Right. And look at the investment piece to it as well. Like, how much will this cost? Because, putting yourself in, $500,000 or more in debt for student loans, like, if the risk of not completing is high, like, kind of going back to Brendan's question, like, can you do something that's like close to that maybe doesn't have as huge of a financial and time commitment to it? I'm not saying you can't do it. I'm saying make sure you have your supports around you and be really committed to it.
And part of where I was going with that thought process, right, was psychiatrist is like shiny, like it's the shiny option of mental health. Do you know what I mean? So if what you want to do, and just as an example, like if what you want to do is mental health work and you kind of don't care if you can prescribe or not, why go through all the extra effort to get the shiny? Because all you're going to do is prescribe. But if your motivation is to help people and like do counseling work, you can be a social worker, you can be a psychologist, you can be a mental health clinician, you can be a coach, kind of, sort of. Like, there's a lot of different options within that umbrella of mental health. Look at the one that feels the most attainable to you and also is going to be the job you want. If you're looking at grad school, you might not really have a full grasp of what that job means yet. So find out what the job means, find out what you think it means, and then figure out what you really want to do and whether or not that is the thing that you're looking at. And
good luck to her or whatever decision she makes. That's pretty awesome. It's so few people are able to get to that level of education. So I just think it's amazing. Those people who have done that. Just know that, like, you got to have that sort of marathon runner mentality. Like, it's going to be hard and long, but if you get to the end, like, it will probably have been totally worth it. All right. I think we have time for one more question.
How about Sandra? Are there any professions that people with ADD tend to excel in?
Ballet dance. No, I don't know why that was the first thing that just came to my brain. Yes. And I think the most important thing when someone's asked, like, what professions are people with ADHD good at? It's the ones they're interested in, right? Like, above all, I mean, I've worked with people with ADHD who are accountants, which, like, hurts my brain to even understand that. But they love numbers, like, and that's like their thing. Where I know they're unicorns, but like they exist, right? We do know that there's a lot of ADHD in high risk types of professions. From like paramedics to police to emergency room doctors. It's also, there's a lot of ADHD, I think, in some of the more challenging areas of mental health, and entrepreneurship as well. Like, because entrepreneurship is like, the job of entrepreneurship is you are solving problems constantly. Like, you are creating stuff and solving problems all day long. Like, that is what it means to be an entrepreneur. Other things, I mean, you see a lot of ADHD in the arts, in the creative arts. But I think it's important for people that are considering that to know that that is a business you are going into. It is not just your craft, right? People who think that it's just the craft are going to struggle. People who are going in for the craft and understand the business and the marketing and the, like, you got to be able to sell yourself, like, could do very well in those spaces. What else? Moira, what do you got?
Well, I think it depends on understanding your own ADHD as well, because definitely number one, like love what you do, but also how much structure do you like? The example of extreme structure is the military. And some people with ADHD like that because then they don't have to make decisions about some things, right? You don't have a decision about where you're living. There's lots of things that you don't have to decide. And so that can make life less stressful. I come from a military family. I went for one night. You're not going to tell me how to stand. So that wasn't a fit for me. But in teaching, there's also very hard and fast rules that you can't mess with. Like the school year is set. Your vacations are set. There is a bell that you need to be there by a certain time. But within that, there is a lot of latitude. You can change your job every year and nobody is going to bat an eye. So it's kind of sort of thinking about those things about your personality too, and how you work.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I think that the interest is, to me, the fundamental thing. Like if you're interested in it, if it turns your brain on, you're going to be all right.
And real quick, just if you're an ADHD person who has jumped from career to career or job to job, and that's kind of your history, another thing I like to talk about is what is your skill stack, right? Like you've learned stuff in bouncing from career to career and job to job and all that stuff. And you've got an interesting stack of skills that makes you unique. So figure out what that skill stack points you towards and what that means you're good at when you're trying to figure out what comes next.
That is all the time that we do have for today. We do this every month on the second Tuesday of the month. Same time, same place. Thank you, Moira, Brendan, MJ, Will, and of course, Barb. And go subscribe to all of our podcasts. So you can check all of them out by going to the podcast network page at ADHDrewired.com. We will see all of you. Oh, Will, did you have a dad joke queued up?
What's brown and rhymes with Snoop? Dr. Dre.
Wow.
I think I need to write that down to share with my 12-year-olds.
Oh.
And remember it that long.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Will. Go check out his moments of dad on hacking your ADHD, and we'll catch you all next month.
Bye.
Bye, everyone. This is Eric Tivers. Thank you for listening, and congratulations for making it to the end. ADHD Rewired is more than just a podcast. We are a community focused on learning, growing, and connection. The website is ADHDrewired.com. You can find summaries and additional resources for each episode. You can apply to our free and secret Facebook community. You can learn more about ADHD Rewired's intensive online video-based coaching and accountability groups, and sign up for my email newsletter to get exclusive content you won't get anywhere else. It's all at ADHDrewired.com. While you're there, click the Patreon button. If you're a regular listener and you're still listening to my voice, consider making a monthly contribution by becoming a patron through our Patreon page. If you are able to financially support my work, it would mean a lot. This show is free to listeners, but it is not free to produce. And patrons get really cool perks. You can follow me on Twitter at Eric Tivers. You can like our Facebook page at facebook.com/ADHDrewired. If you're a coach, therapist, or related professional, connect with me on LinkedIn at linkedin.com/Eric Tivers. You can also subscribe to ADHD Rewired on YouTube. And you can subscribe to ADHD Rewired on YouTube and see select interviews and some other videos I've posted. Podcasts change lives. You can make a difference in someone's life by spreading the word about this podcast. Mention it in your online communities on Facebook, Twitter, Reddit, or wherever you hang out online. And be sure to share it with your friends and your family and your clients, as well as your coaches, therapists, and doctors. And if you're a coach, therapist, doctor, or ADHD support group leader, and you would like a pack of podcast postcards to hand out, You can request those at my website, ADHDrewired.com. And if you're a member of CHAD or any other ADHD support group, please be sure to tell them about this podcast. You can even show them how to download it on their phone. You know, you might be the person that turns somebody on to a podcast for the very first time. And if you really love this episode, please consider hitting share on your podcast player. I'm only one person, and I count on you to help me spread the message. One of the biggest things that you can do to support this podcast and to help other people discover it is to leave an honest rating and review on Apple Podcasts, on Stitcher, or any other podcast app that accepts ratings and reviews. And don't forget to hit subscribe on this podcast on your podcast app so new episodes are automatically pushed to your favorite podcast app. Looking for more ways to listen and learn? Get a free audiobook and a 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/ADHD rewired. Not sure where to start? In no particular order. Check out Atomic Habits by James Clear, The Body Keeps Score by Bessel van der Kolk, 10% Happier, and Meditation for Fidgety Skeptics. These are both by Dan Harris. Change Your Questions and Change Your Life by Marilee G. Adams. The One Thing by Gary Keller and Jay Papasan. Procrastinate on Purpose by Rory Vaden. The Four Tendencies by Gretchen Rubin. Do you have trouble asking for help? Listen to The Art of Asking by Amanda Palmer. It's one of the best produced audiobooks I've ever heard. If you're looking for something a little bit more, say, magical, I unexpectedly fell in love with the Harry Potter series. And I don't usually listen to those kinds of books, and I loved it. And of course, if you haven't yet boarded the Brene Brown bus yet, check out Brene Brown's books, starting with The Gifts of Imperfection, Daring Greatly, Rising Strong, The Power of Vulnerability. And if you're an entrepreneur or leader in any capacity, check out her 2018 book, Dare to Lead. And Brene still is my most wanted guest, so if you know Brene, and you would be so kind to make that connection for me, I would be really, really grateful. You know who else I would like to have on the show? You. Click the podcast tab at ADHDrewired.com and then click the Be a Guest button at the top of that page and schedule a 15-minute pre-interview. This is Eric Tivers, reminding you to keep learning, keep growing, and keep connecting. Self-care is not selfish, and no matter what gets done or doesn't get done, at the end of the day, you are still enough. And no matter how hard it feels, we can do hard things. Thanks for listening. I'll catch you next week.